Good morning, everybody. This is Walk the Dog, and it is Friday morning, about 6:30. Getting a bit of a late start, but that being said, the kids don't have school, so there's no incentive to hurry up and get ready and everything. If anything, now me getting up just means more work, which is good. But yeah, it's Friday. It'll be the last one of these from here or at least for this week, because next week I'll be in LA. So a lot to talk about today. First off, let's talk about ranked. I got a few games in of ranked yesterday. I've been playing ranked ever since that coaching session. My peak so far now is I've been up at 480 LP, and then I had two bad games, and so I'm at 404 right now, 405. What's really interesting to me so far, looking at this meta and how people are playing it, is I don't know what's going on at that particular elo, but the early game, everyone's either open forting or max greeting. It's wild to me. I had 3 different games where I'm 100 health at 4-1. One of them I was 100 health at 5-1. It was just blowing my mind. Now, keep in mind, all of those games I end up getting second or third because one of the greeting high rollers ends up capping around 5 amp or a Zac. So it's these 5 cost boards have some of the biggest caps for sure. But man, the people willing to just first or eighth greet it for those has been pretty wild. So at least at the meta I'm playing at, it certainly feels like Samira and Zac are the 2 premier forcible end game comps that can guarantee you that first place. So it's pretty interesting. Also starting to see Garen finally see some play, which is cool to see, without being too unhealthy. So yeah, overall still seems like a decent meta. Biggest thing is probably Nitro is kind of weak. That being said, I found myself having a couple Nitro games regardless, and again, you don't really cap is the thing. So we'll see. Today's already low clock for the patch. Yeah. Okay. Another update. Obviously, the cat stuff yesterday was pretty wild. I showed that to my wife and daughter. They got all excited. They're like, "Can we go try to find it? Can we go try to find it?" So I actually I drove out twice trying to find it, and we were able to find it once. This was early in the morning before the kids went to school. I was able to find it, but I couldn't get it back. And so I ended up kind of giving up and was sort of like, okay, well, whatever. Well, fast forward to the evening, and I was post work. So this was 5:30, 6 o'clock. I was like, I'm ready to go for a walk. Leo, you want to come for me with a walk? She's like, yeah. Because she's all excited thinking we might find the cat. And I'm like, there's no way. There's no way we are going to find this cat. So she, I'm like, well, just in case, bring the treats with you. But, this isn't going to happen. So we start walking. We do our walk. And we get to the part where the cat has been the last 2 days. Nothing. No sign of the cat. This is not unexpected. This is what I would expect. It's also this time of day, there were a lot more of the people who live way out there coming home. A couple of them kept bothering me. They're like, "Why are you walking here?" It's like, because I can. It's like, well, this is private property. I'm like, yeah, I know. I stay away from the houses. Relax. So a couple Karens on my ass, which was really annoying. So fine, we reach the halfway point. We turn around. We start walking back. And what do we see? We see the cat. I'm like, Leo, look, there it is. She starts getting so excited. And sure enough, we get up to the cat. A truck comes by, almost runs it over. So that was great, which freaked my daughter out. And I'm like, Leo, get the treats out. So we bait the cat. We get the cat towards us. And this cat is starved for attention. And so Leo's like, can we bring it home? And I'm like, I'm not wearing a long sleeve shirt. So I'm like, how am I going to carry this thing without it scratching me to hell? Leo's wearing a sweater. So she's like, can we wrap it up in the sweater? I'm like, okay. So we wrap it up in the sweater and I carry it home. The whole time I'm carrying it in my arms. Leo's petting it and it's purring like crazy. We get it to the house. We put it in the garage where there's 2 cars. and it goes running up and up inside one of the like underneath and up into one of the cars. And it's like, oh God, how do we get it out of there? So we get some cat food, we bring it out, we get the cat, we put it in the carrier. So we move the cars out of the garage because we don't want the cat inside the house with our cats because we have no idea, how healthy it is or anything like that. So now basically we have an empty garage. Our cars are sitting in the driveway. We have an empty garage. We moved one of the cat holder, like the scratching post things out there for it. We put some water and food. We gave it like a makeshift box bed with a nice soft blanket. And we have a cat in our garage, which my daughter has named Sephiroth. So the cat is named Sephiroth right now. It was very hungry. It scarfed down the food. Now, all of this, fast forward to, we left it in the garage overnight. And I wake up this morning and, notice it's 6:30. This is later than I normally start. So I go check in the garage and see how it is. And he has this spot in like my work boxes or like my tool boxes where he kind of likes to hide. And he was hiding there. I brought him out a few treats and gave him some, because my wife doesn't want to give him breakfast till like 7 or something. I gave him a few treats and he immediately lights up when he sees me. Meow, meow. Very talkative, very talkative. I start walking away. He circles me. I'm like, okay, let me put you in your bed. And he immediately jumps out, circles me, nuzzling my. So I sit down, and he jumps up on my lap, starts nuzzling my face, nuzzling my legs, puts a little spot in his lap, and I start petting him. I have him on my lap for a good 15 minutes of just like, he's as happy as a clam that he's getting love and attention. And so then I'm like, I gotta go, dude. And he tries to follow me into the house. He's like, don't leave me, bro. Broke my heart. I'm like, I got stuff to do. I gotta go about my day. But yeah, so TLDR, we have a stray cat in our house that really, really likes me right now. And yeah, so, and it's really bad timing too, because it's like, okay, cool, form a bond with me. By the way, I'm heading to LA for a week. But my daughter's pretty excited also. She's happy taking care of it. She was out there in the garage for a bit with it. So we're going to feed it and keep it. It worked out. My wife has a vet appointment for 2 of the cats today. So she's going to take those 2 cats and then schedule one for the stray. Its poor fur is matted to death. So yeah, anyway, I won't keep boring you with cat stuff, but TLDR, Sephiroth's in my garage. So there you go. All right, questions. I owe you guys questions. All right, now we know we're not going to have a surprise cat visitor. We're going to be done with this, and I can focus on the questions. So, all right. First question is an interesting one. It's how do we maintain the skill floor? And this is basically like for people who want to play TFT but aren't necessarily that good. How do we keep them interested? Does MMR really help here? Do bots really help here? Like what is our tactics and how does that work out for keeping those folks engaged in TFT? So I don't like this conversation because when you start talking about this, it sounds manipulative, even though it's not. But let me explain. Let's say you have, the first thing you do when you make a game is like you have a core game for its intended target audience, right? So TFT, strategy game, we've made all the rules. You know how it works. And we know, hey, this is a pretty difficult game to get into and pretty high skill ceiling, but like, it is what it is, okay? Great, we've made this game. Love it. People have fun. Now, we need to grow, right? This is where the business side of things comes in. And it's like, okay, how do we make sure more people out there know that TFT might be a game for them? And if you think back to like your very first game of TFT, where you had no idea what you were doing, it might have been painful, right? And so, in design, the question you ask yourself is, how do I want the player's very first experience with TFT to go? Now, this shouldn't shock you, But let's say your very first game of TFT is against Skara and Soju and a bunch of other players. What's going to happen? Obviously, they're going to kick your butt. You're going to be like, why is their army so much better than mine? Why am I going 8th? I don't get it. This is insane, right? And you might quit. The odds of you sticking with the game after being brutally beat down by the best players, pretty low, right? So you have to say, hey, how can I make sure that player has a positive experience? Now, the extreme version of this is, well, I'll have them play against 7 bots and guarantee they win. That way, everyone's first experience is a positive one. But here's the thing. If players realize that, and they're like, hey, my first 2 games are just against bots and these are easy, that's boring, right? And having a boring game is also a reason for churn. It's just like, well, I'm not going to play this boring game. I can tell you, and I won't throw the game under the bus, but there was one game in recent years where you had to play a ton of bot games, and I got so bored, I quit for sure, right? So, like, that's not a good experience either, right? So part of design is making sure that new player experience is both engaging enough, but not punishing enough. And so, yeah, this is where things like bots can help, right? This is where things like MMR obviously help, so that your first game isn't against Skara and Skoju. But that's part of the process, is thinking through what that is. Now, do I think our new player experience right now is perfect? No. In fact, if you talk to some of my bosses, you would say that's one of our biggest areas of improvement, right? Because it's like, play a tutorial, play a couple bot games, and then go play ranked and get beat down. Oof. Now, the good news is, one of the things I think we've done that is clever, and this is credit to all the people involved in these, is I think we have other offerings than ranked, right? If you're actually a new player, obviously we have things like Talker's Trials, where it's like, hey, here's a safe place where you can just kind of play and learn until you're ready. No timer, take your time, read all the tooltips, good stuff. I also think, normal games are good, but also set revivals and Pengu's Party, Chunk's Treasure, stuff like that. Now, those have some asterisks here because, like, if your very first game is Chunk's Treasure, your expectations might be a little off of what TFT is. But those create spaces where if you're still on that, like, early to mid-game journey or that casual journey, you can enjoy TFT and not feel stressed and have fun. So, yeah. So overall, this is like, I could talk about this for hours, but this is one of the things you have to think about is, like, as people get into the TFT ecosystem, what do they experience? Do they have a good time? And again, the cynical way to look at it is like, well, they're manipulating you so you enjoy the game. It's like, no, it's just designing the game so that you have fun. That's it. There's no evilness, but there are definitely people in the industry who aren't game designers that look at that and will talk about it in these weird metrics that makes it sound evil and manipulative. But again, the Nintendo in me is like, just make sure they have fun. That's it. So, yeah, that's kind of how it works. All right, next question. What are your thoughts on support traits like Superfan and Hyperpop? Okay, so this is an interesting one that we've clearly learned some lessons on, right? For example, one of our coolest support traits of all time was Guild. Guild was pretty cool. I think support traits are great, right? It's like, throw in 2 Bastion, your team gets 10 armor and MR. That's awesome, right? I think one of the things that if our game is doing good is it rewards you for dipping into each of the traits a little bit, getting some supportive buffs for your teams, right? One way to look at it is like, you have your primary trait. So let's say 7 Anima Squad. And then you might throw in some support traits, right? Where it's like, hey, I'm going to have 2 Bastion in as well for that 10 armor and MR. And then I might throw in something else, 2 Bruiser, get that 100 health. Support traits are great. I think support traits, though, the thing we learned from Guild is that typically in a support trait, because the trait is not multiplying the power of the person in the trait as much, it ends up being better to play the support trait without that unit, right? So, for example, usually the best person to take advantage of the buff that Superfan gives is not a Superfan. It's someone else. Now, I think this is okay if the trait is small enough, right? Like, let's say you design something like Hyperpop or Superfan, where it's like a max 4, and the entire design is, this is a trait to support the team. I'm actually okay with that. Where that falls apart, though, is Guild, right? Like, when we first shipped Guild, it was like, this is awesome. Great support options, a lot of things you can flex into. But because of that, you would never itemize a Guild champion, right? Like, all the Guild carries were basically unplayable. So, moving forward, what we did with Heavenly and other traits like this, you can see this with Street Demon, KDA, stuff like that, is the people in the trait get a bigger benefit, but everyone else still gets some. So like Strategist is the extreme version of this, right? It's like, you play Strategist in your comp, great. People are getting some damage amp or some damage reduction, cool. But if you're a Strategist, you're getting a bunch more. I think that is the like healthiest version of a support vertical. So you're still excited to put like 5 Street Demon in your comp, even if your primary carry is an amp champion, because it is something. But if you want to play a Street Demon carry, good stuff. So I'm actually a big fan of these. I actually think as we do our trait webs, when you have like 2 or 3 leftover champions, making a support class is a good thing. I think things like Coven end up really interesting. Creates another axis of multiplicativity. Now, that's where I think you have to be careful, right? Like, do I think Hyperpop is really good design? Not really. The fact that Hyperpop is one of those like, well, it feeds into itself, so the best play is to play 4 Lulus. Like, that's not great. Plus, I don't think Hyperpop really meshed well with the headliner mechanic, because it was like, what, a 2-3-4? But there was also an emblem and a headliner, which was very weird. But like, if you had told me Hyperpop was just a 2-piece, worked on unique champions, and existed in the set, I'd be like, great, no problem. You know. Plus, Hyperpop does it in a really healthy way, where it's very concentrated on like 2 units, which is good. So, whereas if it had been team-wide, the number would have had to be so small, it would have been unsatisfactory, right? Like, or you know, what's a Invoker? Invoker? Is that what it's called, this set? What is it called, this set? See, we do so many of these now, I'm losing track, but whatever. No, Dynamo. That's what it's called, this set. Dynamo being, you know, mono regen for team, it's like that number can secretly be, you know, carrying armies because it's such a small amount of power, but multiplied over 8 units. You know, so anyway, TLDR, I support them. I think good support traits are good for the game. All right, this one's an easy one. Do you ever coordinate with LOL on unreleased content? The answer to this is yes, quite frequently. Now, the person asking the question was like, well, what about Arcane? Like, that's an obvious one, but are there other times? It's like, yeah, Arcane was actually like the 5th or 6th time we did it. The one that sticks out in my head is actually Akshan. Akshan, I believe it was set 5? I might have my sets wrong. But Akshan was a brand new champion at the time. And we also wanted to include him in the new TFT set. Witty, who was the set lead at the time, which that makes me think it was set 5. Witty was the set lead at the time. And he coordinated with LOL and was like, we're going to use Akshan. Now, here's where we've struggled with this in the past. TFT's release dates are pretty firm. We set those release dates, and we've never missed one yet. and we don't intend to. League champion release dates are not as firm. They can move them forward, they can move them back to make sure that their champion is perfect in the right spot, and having it adjust a patch or two doesn't really affect them too much. Whereas if we have a set last an extra month, that affects us greatly, which is why we don't move our schedules. And so if we're like, hey, we would like to use this champion, we're releasing on this date, and they're like, cool, we're releasing a patch before that, no problem. And then all of a sudden they have to delay a month, screws everything up, right? And all of a sudden it's like, whoa. Because the other thing is, let's say, let's use Akshan as the example again. If TFT reveals Akshan first, from the player perception, it looks like a TFT thing. But that's not what it is, right? Like, it's a league thing. And we want the league players to feel like this is a thing made for them, because that's important to the league community, that like the league devs are making things for league players. And TFT just happens to borrow them, right? Not that we made something really cool for TFT and then poor league had to leech off. Like, that perception can matter a lot. And so it's always important when we're like borrowing league stuff of like, make sure it goes out to them first. In set 12, Aurora was actually a pretty clear use case where we're like, we should use Aurora in set 12. And unfortunately, this happened, right? Like, the champ got delayed a little bit. It was like, this is too risky. We got to cut Aurora. We can't be all of a sudden a month from ship and go, oops, we don't have one of our 5 costs. So poor Aurora had to get cut. But again, we do try to coordinate where we can. There's even other examples where it's like, yeah, there's the arcane, thing. But another hilarious one was set 2. Set 2 was when League was introducing their elemental dragons for the first time. And we were like, and we'll make our set elements as well, and it'll be this cool coordinated effort. That didn't really pan out for us, The coordination was sort of lost, and at the time, thankfully things have changed, but at the time it was sort of like League doing big cool thing, tiny little TFT stealing assets from it. It didn't quite work out as well. So, but we're still looking for opportunities. Obviously, another example is like, we know what skins they're releasing for like a year in advance. So we can look at those skins and sort of be like, ooh, we definitely want to use this skin in our set. So just be ready. When's the release date of those skins? 4 months before we ship. Great, we can include them in our paper structure as we're making the set. So that's always nice. Because the skins team is usually pretty good about their roadmap and pretty good about meeting their deadlines. We usually don't try to ship anything that's like 2 weeks or a month away from our release date just in case. But because they have enough planned on their roadmap, it's like, ooh, that's really cool. Can we use that in a set? Hell yeah. So yeah, definitely a lot of coordination. Now, in the reverse, it's actually become just sort of like silly moments, right? Where like the modes team goes, hey, we need a shopkeeper for whatever mode. Can we just borrow Kobuko? Yeah, sure. So they'll meet with our art team, make sure that, they're doing Kobuko justice, and great, no problem. TFT is pretty lax about this considering how much we take from League. So yeah, there's some good coordination there. And I think it usually works out in players' benefit, where it's like, oh cool, there's this new champ Akshan, he's pretty sweet on the Rift. And also he's in TFT. That's neat. So. But yeah, like for example, if there's new champs coming down the line, we're having discussions about if they should be in set 16 or set 17. That's just common. So yeah, there you go. All right, last question is probably the hardest one. I mentioned once that like Riot probably wishes I didn't stream. Can I elaborate? So I'll do my best here. Riot's a big company. Riot is a very large company now. It shocks me how many people are at Riot nowadays. I think When I joined, it was like 2,300. And now we're at like 4,000 or 5,000. It's some insane number. We have this thing at Riot. It's called geezer.io. And basically you type in your name and it says, you've been here longer than X% of current employees. And so, for example, if you search up Paul Beleza, it's like 99.9% of employees because he was the first intern. You know, he's been here forever. I'm already at like 94%. I've been here longer than 94% of rioters, which is like, excuse me, what? Whereas like at NST, Nintendo, I had been there 10, 11 years, and I could probably point to half the because again, it's only like a 40-person studio, but like half the people at the company had still been there longer than me, right? Like people like Rory and John Johnson, who are still there, and when I was at my 10, they were hitting their 20s, you know? So it was a very weird change for me. And so the reason I bring this up is because when there's a lot of people, this is true of anything, there are going to be a diverse set of opinions within those people. Now, some people at Riot look at what I do with the streaming and they're like, that's amazing. That's awesome. I think that's really beneficial for Riot. And I'm glad he does that. And when I say some people, this isn't just like some random, like, you know, there are people who are my direct bosses or in the highest level of leadership who think this, who are like, yeah, Mort's great for Riot. That's awesome. That's awesome. But one of the things about running a company is that generally when you try to make rules, those rules have to apply to everyone fairly. And so, you know, if you let one employee do a thing, other employees are going to go, why can't I do the thing? Right? And there's not really a good logical justification other than, well, because, you know, dumb example here, but let's take this here is like, if you let some high-powered M6 engineer go live remote, a bunch of other people are going to go, well, why can't I live remote? And then you have to go, well, because he's more important than you, which is obviously unfair and biased and looks really bad. So you try to create a standard of rules, right? Where it's like, okay, well, maybe a certain number of people, or you have to be a certain rank, you know, so you try to create like nice and fair guidelines. And so for people that are in charge of making those fair guidelines for the company, I'm an anomaly. I'm, you know, again, I'm entrusted because I've built up a lot of rep over time, but there's a lot of people who are like, it's not fair that Mort gets to do this. Why don't I get to do it? Or there's people who are like, by letting Mort do this, we're creating a bunch of problems. There's also the brand risk, right? Like, if you think about all the negatives that I could potentially bring, it's things like, you know, if I say something stupid, it represents the company pretty heavily, and that's important to keep in mind. Or if, what's another example? Oh, this is where it can be really bad. Like, if people associate a game with Mort more than they do with Riot, that's really bad. That's why I've tried really hard to make sure it's synergistic. But there are definitely game companies out there where the public-facing person takes a little bit too much credit for stuff they didn't do. And so that can be really bad. It can create animosity where it's like, imagine, so here's an example. Imagine you worked really hard on Pengu's Party. You're a new designer. I'm calling this out because this is a real thing. We have a relatively new tech designer on our team. He switched over from engineering to tech design. He's doing a great job. And he worked on Pengu's Party. And he got Pengu's Party, like this version of Pengu's Party. It's out there. He's excited. He's been tweeting about it. He's like, look at this cool mode. And he doesn't have the visibility I do. So his tweets get like 4 or 5 likes. But he should still be really proud of his work. And then you see a Twitter post that's like, thanks Mortdog for Pengu's Party. Right? That can feel really bad. Mort didn't work on Pengu's Party. I did. I'm the tech designer. I worked on this, right? And that's not good. That's not good at all. Because this tech designer deserves all the credit. And they do. And that's why I, again, explicitly try to call out when people are like, no, they did this thing, you know, not me. But what I've also tried to help people understand is like, when people say Mortdog, a lot of the times what they mean in abstract is the TFT team, but that can be harmful, right? It's one of the reasons why in a lot of our TFT branding stuff, it's like, using me, while powerful, doesn't give everyone else the opportunity to represent their stuff. And yes, I already sort of, because of what I do, I sort of inherently get some credit regardless. So putting me out there in front of more stuff just would reinforce that, which isn't great. And so all of this is to say, if you're, running branding or running a business and trying to keep it fair, I'm a pain in the ass. I'm an absolute pain in the ass anomaly that can be a brand risk and create a lot of frustration and unfairness. And so there are definitely people who are kind of like, if he could just not stream, that would make things a lot easier. If he could just not make all these Twitter posts, that would make things a lot easier. And it would. It would. I'm a weird anomaly in the industry. There is, as far as I can tell, for better or worse, no one out there that is as open and brutally honest about, the game industry and their game and stuff like that, and willing to be like, hey, when we ship a bad patch, I'm like, oh yeah, that patch was bad. Thankfully, it's because I'm so involved in some of those patches that it's like I'm basically shitting on my own work. I can do that. But I try not to shit on somebody else's work. Like, let's say, hypothetically, and this isn't the case, but let's say Pengu's Party was a big stinker. I wouldn't be like, oh yeah, that was that tech designer. He didn't know what he was doing, and we're still training him. No, that's not how it works. That's just shitty leadership. I've said this before on stream, that the best leaders give all the credit to someone else and take all the blame. Like, that's the philosophy I've tried to live by. But again, even regardless of that, there's still, again, no matter how much I do that, if somebody posts, thanks Mortdog for Pengu's Party, that can hurt people, that can feel bad. Because I didn't do that, So, and we've got hardworking people like Christina and her team on the events, that really deserve all the credit. So, or even sets, it's like, Sloan's going to be the set lead of set 15, and I'm going to try to highlight him. I want to have him on the rundown so he can talk about that. I know he's in like the main dev trailer and stuff like that. And like, did I help with set 15? Of course. But like, who cares? I'm just one cog in the machine. And, that's the other thing too, is the reality is everyone's replaceable. No matter how good you are at your job, everyone's replaceable. And so I try to hold that true. It's like, if Mort left TFT today, TFT will go on. It'll be fine. So. But yeah, so that's why I think there's people that would prefer I didn't stream. So, all right, this is getting a little long. Hopefully the microphone hasn't shut off. I got to wrap this up. Stream this weekend. Should be fun. Then I got to hitch a flight. Don't forget it's Father's Day on Sunday. Tell people Happy Father's Day. And then I'll try to be doing these from the Riot campus next week. So still post questions. Still let me know what you want to talk about. And yeah, so I'm going to go home, have breakfast, and check on Sephiroth. So that'll be fun. All right, that's going to do it for me. Until next time, take it easy.